morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon for our Summit Series presentation. Not all integrations are the same, understanding your LMS integration options. I'm Kim McDonald, a member of the product marketing team, and we're really excited and pleased that you took the time out of your day to join our session today. We hope that you will be very interested in the information that is presented, and we want you to participate as much as possible. So feel free to use your Q&A at the bottom to bring up any questions you have throughout the presentation. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping things I'd like to take care of. First of all, this session is being recorded. All of the participants are on mute and your cameras are off. And we will end the session with a Q&A. So as I mentioned, please make sure that you enter your questions or comments in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is really exciting. We've got a couple of subject matter experts here to teach you all about integrations with your LMS systems. We know that today's IT systems are often a collection of cloud-based apps from different vendors, ideally the best of breed solutions for your organization's unique needs, but that they need to be integrated to work together effectively. When done right, LMS integrations facilitate efficient workflows, better visibility of learner progress, and allow for the delivery of learning in the flow of work. We've got a couple of great speakers today. First, I'd like to introduce you to Jeremey Yanofsky. He's a senior product owner at Absorb. Jeremey has been managing successful technology products from concept to delivery for more than 15 years, and he likes to ensure that customers are at the heart of everything he does. A lifelong learner, Jeremey is continually working to refine his skills to ensure top quality products that are delivered on time and on budget. Jeremey recently applied those polished skills to a recent home renovation and is looking forward to having a functioning kitchen again. Jeremey has been with Absorb for 2 years and is focused on partner integrations and the Infuse product. Joining Jeremey for our presentation today is Kenneth Friesen. Kenneth is a product manager at Absorb, and he really gets a kick out of solving problems using technology and collaboration. Product management allows him to go even one layer deeper, determining which problems should be solved. Once an aspiring cartoonist, Ken now uses his creative energy to deliver unique solutions to solve customer needs. He's got a wide range of industry experience, including robotics, smart cars, and clean energy. If you're lucky enough to be in the inner circle, Kenneth might even draw you a bespoke holiday card. Wow. Ken has joined the Absorb team in January 2022 and is focused on turnkey integrations. So we look forward to hearing all of that. They come with their knowledge today. And today's webinar will give you a crash course on why LMS integrations are important and what challenges they pose. Ken and Jeremey will go over the different approaches to LMS integrations in the industry and how to decide which integration solutions may be the best to solve each of your unique requirements. And as I mentioned, to finish up, we'll be having a Q&A. So thanks very much. Happy that you joined us, and I'll turn it over to Ken and Jeremey.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm going to start off with a quick definition to get us rolling today. But before I do, as we go through today's conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A function, as Kim mentioned, but let us know what integrations might be useful for you and your organizations, right? Ken and I absolutely love data points that we can use when making roadmap plans, and your input is critical. And then, sort of as Kim mentioned, we'll do our best either to answer your questions in the flow of our discussion today or at the end. So let's talk a little bit about what are LMS integrations and integrations in general. So in general, an integration between two systems means that one system can share information with another system. It's kind of that simple, right? In the LMS context that we live here at Absorb every day, what this means is the ability of your LMS to share data with software across your tech stack, allowing for automated workflows, better visibility, and improved learning outcomes. So sort of what Kim was saying, in this session, we're going to dive into, a couple of key points. We're going to talk about why LMS integrations are so important. We'll run through some of the common challenges that are faced. We'll talk through different approaches that exist and what they might mean to you. And finally, how you might pick the best approach that is right for your organization. All right, so let's talk about LMS integrations specifically. Why are they important? The use of cloud-based applications has grown because it's relatively easy to find and deploy the best solution for each platform. When you have an ecosystem of applications that satisfy your organizational needs, it's really critical that these apps work together, and the options available for SaaS or software as a service integrations, they're always evolving, there's always changing. So whether you're training your employees for compliance or upskilling, or if you use your LMS to deliver training to your partners and customers, there's some key benefits here that we'd like to sort of go through. The first is workflow automation. So automating the exchange of data between the LMS and your other systems, or your other systems and the LMS. Measuring the effectiveness of your learning and development programs is key to maximizing your return on investment. And then even taking actions based on these metrics, like a sales performance data from a CRM, triggering suggestions for training for individuals and teams. Really, really important. Many organizations prefer to create their own specialized training materials that are relevant to their unique use cases. In some cases, it's required. But it's also very common to leverage the wealth of third-party learning and development content that's available today. And so, an integration with content in an LMS space could look like, your administrator goes and curates the best available content that would be useful for your organization, and then makes that available to your employees, your partners, or your customers. And then, finally, learning in the flow, it goes far beyond just contextual help, and it brings learning directly into the systems that your learners are using day to day, and does it in their moment of need. So not only does this get the user unblocked, but because it's in the moment of need, it really greatly increases knowledge retention of the subject matter. So at Absorb, we call this the headless LMS, and we have a product that satisfies this need called Infuse.
Jeremy, thanks. Thanks for setting that up. I could easily see why it would be important to integrate with content providers and grab great content for my learners, and also kind of makes sense that you could use integrating to deliver that content in the flow of work. But kind of wondering also, are there any other types of apps that I might want to integrate my LMS with, right?
Yeah, definitely. So content is one aspect of it, but when we look at the ecosystem of applications that an organization might have, the first thing that comes to mind is supplying learners to the LMS from a source system. Okay, so this could include industry-leading HRIS or HCM applications such as Workday, Ceridian, UKG, Bamboo HR. And CRM applications such as Salesforce or ADP for partners and customer learners. So these applications are often the receiver of updates as users progress through their training programs, but also the source of truth for users, right? You would already be using these applications. So besides supplying learners and receiving these progress updates, integrations with CRMs like Salesforce can also be used to track learning and development program effectiveness. And for CRM users, you could even deliver training directly there in their flow of work. So another aspect of LMS integrations involve virtual meeting configuration. Chat and video conferencing software such as Microsoft Teams, virtual meeting providers like we're in today, like Zoom, those could also be very good integration targets. And then if your business is primarily serving training to external learners, you might look to integrate with an e-commerce or payment gateway provider, such as a Shopify or a PayPal.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That makes sense. Could you tell me a little bit more about how the data would flow between the LMS and these types of applications?
Yeah, good question. There are sort of two classes, I'd say of data, flow here. The first, is sort of a triggered sync, and the other is more of like on-demand functionality. So when I think of triggered syncs, I think of a one-time move, and a one-time move is really a movement of data that happens just one time for any given instance or sort of use case. For example, if you're setting up a system for the first time, you might want to import data into that system to get you going. Okay, so this usually involves a significant amount of data, and you might do this sort of at the beginning before any other integrations are set up, or it might be done sort of side by side with ongoing integrations. Then you could have something like a one-way sync. Okay, so a one-way sync is a way to keep two systems in sync on a specific data point, such as maybe prices for items in an online store, if that was your use case. In the LMS use case, we might point back to a user sync, like I mentioned, from a source system of record, like an HRIS or HCM system, back to the LMS, right? One-way syncs might be scheduled, they might be triggered, or invoked on demand, right? And they could either be a push from one system to another or a pull from one system from another. Okay, two-way syncs are fairly similar, right? But it's just more data. So two-way syncs are just basically a bi-directional integration that is used to keep two systems in sync on a given data subject or multiple points of data. So you would use a two-way sync instead of a one-way sync when your rules allow you to change data in both places, and you want to keep both items synchronized. For example, if both customers and staff members are updating an open service ticket, you might want both systems to understand the current state. A two-way sync could also be looked at as a set of one-way syncs. So if I have a source of truth on one side for one piece of data and another source of truth on the other side for a different piece of data, and both pieces should get the both sets of information, we might set up basically bi-directional sync, but of unique data points. So you could do that as well. On-demand and data and functionality is a little bit different, right? So on-demand data, we use this to make data such as product inventory levels available to calling systems as needed, right? This would be initiated from the calling system. An example in this case could be an API call to a source system for current status. Some of our LMS clients use gather course information in order to display a catalog on their own sites, as an example. On-demand functionality goes a little bit further than just accessing the data, where it's all about executing some function in another system. So, an example of this could be that, we're creating a user, or we're performing some level of functionality based on the call that's being made.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess back in the day, one thing we could always fall back on was, an application dropping a file which the other application picks up, right? So can I still do like file transfer integrations?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. And in some cases, that might be the best way to get the job done. But before you make that sort of decision, there are some factors to consider and some potential challenges that you might want to overcome. So let's talk about some of those potential challenges here. So broadly, integrations can be unique. They might pose some challenges. So in order to make sure that we're well set up for success, let's consider, all the, the scope of what could happen here. And then let's also review the different integration approaches that we can take. And then we'll come up with sort of a solution. So as far as challenges goes, there's probably more than 5, but I've tried to sort of narrow it down. So let's talk about access of data. So remember, when we have 2 connected systems and we want to send data from one to the other, we need to make sure that, everything being equal, right? Authentication works, the 2 systems know each other. We need to make sure that the data is there in the system that we need it from, and we need to make sure that it's both there and available, right? So we need both of those, and then there's an element of access control there that we need to make sure exists as well. Data security is increasingly critical, and your data is going to be important to you, and the security of that data is really important to your learners in the LMS context. And every time you run an integration, that could be a point, sort of a vector for attack. And so we want to make sure that not only do we have strong authentication and authorization, but also across the line, there's encryption for secure communication and then secure storage as well. So that's a consideration here. The next here is around operational monitoring and change management. So there's many integration options. There's self-service platforms, there's APIs, there's file transfers like we talked about, there's software as a service, vendor tooling. And if there's inconsistency and a lack of coordination in your approach, then that could limit your operational visibility and your ability to manage this change. So taking a very ad hoc approach to your integrations might pose or an organizational challenge for you in the future. And then keeping data in sync sounds like a pretty straightforward problem to solve on the surface, but it's actually pretty complex. So directionality, which way the data is flowing, the timing, the trust hierarchy, the data integrity, the data quality on top of the integrity. How do you merge updates? How do you handle problems? All of these things add to the complexity of any integration that's done. And the more complexity that you have, potentially the more cost you have, which leads into cost benefit, right? So key trade-off is between the degree of functionality that your integration provides versus the amount of effort and cost, and mind share and time that it's going to take you to both create it and then service it and maintain it afterwards, right? So there's a lot of considerations, I think, that that go into making an integration decision. So one more note here. There are enterprise level application suites, integration tools, and platforms, and these exist, and they're potentially good options. They come with a price tag, and depending on the size of your organization, that may be a good choice for you, or that might be a limiting choice for you. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a good list. I would add one more though. I think timing might be an issue as well, or a challenge, because when you want to sync data, the difference between real time and when you actually get it could create a problem, right? So 2 things I'm thinking of is that if you're a supervisor and you're putting a lot of people through training, you'd like, almost like a dashboard to see how they're progressing, right? They've enrolled, they finished this. And if you've got to wait, hours or days, horribly, it's kind of hard to manage that effectively. And the other thing is, the outcome of this training is often that people are certified or shown to be competent to do something in their job, whether it's a new piece of equipment and so on. And if the LMS has not had the opportunity to then tell the other system, I confirm this person has the competency or has the certification, right? And now they can start their job, then they can't start their job, right? So this is something that affects people very directly. So yeah, timing would be one.
Great points. Thank you.
Yeah, and all the things you've said so far really kind of set the context for me to talk about the integration approaches that are used in industry today. So thanks for that. So yeah, so looking around, what are the different options you have for approaches? Let's go through a few. So I guess the ultimate in kind of things having things under your control is if you do it yourself, right? So when I say custom integrations, I mean that you either your own development team or someone you contract or a technology partner is now going to build, an integration just for you, right? So it's great for if you have a small amount of integrations between two apps that you really need to know a lot about each other and they're relatively stable in that regard. So the pros of this approach would be that you really don't have a lot of constraints kind of put on you, right? The amount that you can develop is really limited by the technologies and the talent of the developers there. And you pick your own technology that you want to use. And when perhaps that this solution or integration needs to migrate to a more mediated platform that takes care of some of those other problems and challenges that Jeremy talked about, you can kind of decide when that makes sense. What the caution is that make sure that's part of your process, right? You're not just kind of leaving things and never get back to them, or you're creating tech debt. Some of the cons to this approach is that when you build something, now you created a responsibility, a lifetime responsibility that you have to, you have to maintain it, to make sure that it's, behaving properly, meeting regulations, and you have to provide support. Each time you create a new piece of software, this point-to-point integration, now you have potentially a security risk you've developed because things are happening outside the organization, and another point of failure if one or the other side changes or stops working properly. It is a development project, so that could mean, depending how process heavy you are, a big deal, right? Where there's approvals and there's handoffs to different folks and different stages of it. And if you try to kind of shorten that process by taking shortcuts, once again, you're creating tech debt, which might come back to haunt you later. Since it's kind of, you've coupled those two applications tightly together, it might be hard to reuse or extend what you've done. And then there's all that thing about monitoring, right? You want to make sure this thing is actually doing what it's supposed to be. If you've used really kind of novel technology your organization is not used to do this integration, or if you haven't integrated in your operational tech stack, then you may actually not be able to monitor this and you may actually lose track of it. All right. Another approach is to use APIs. So often companies say, here's an API you can use to get access to my data. Use RESTful APIs, which just means basically that it follows a certain design constraint such that developers can look at the calls and look at the documentation and really kind of understand what it's going to do, right? And therefore how to use it. So you can use this when you have a set of pretty straightforward, well understood integrations doing very specific tasks. I'm going to add a learner to the LMS, or I'm going to grab some data for a report, right? So it's a very common standardized approach, which developers will understand. And depending on the job that the organization that kind of exposed this API and developed it, it should give you really good access to what you need to do in terms of the data model to do your workflows and reporting. Downside is that since you're talking to another system, there's something outside your control, right? So that other organization might change the contract, the way data is exchanged, or even your access credentials might change right, without notice. The other thing is just the power that the API grants you might become a problem, right? Certainly with a RESTful API, it's not necessarily going to do a lot of checks for you or kind of keep track of what's happening in the conversation. There's no state, right? So it's really up to you to make sure you're not asking the system to do something it shouldn't or create data integrity problems. And then finally, every time that you have a public endpoint, it could be a vector for an attack, right? Denial of service. How does that sound, Jeremy?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Right. So another approach is integrated suites. So if your organization has purchased a suite, it may include apps that you wanted to integrate with. So this is best for leveraging a set of apps in the same solution space that work well together, right? So suites often have a theme, be it financial or human resource and so on. And those are the stars of the suite, right? So the pros of that is those apps should be fully integrated, you would expect. You'd also expect not to have to put any additional time or cost to make them exchange data. And you'd also expect that the interactions between them are fully automated, right? You wouldn't have to kind of see things in one part of the suite and then type them into another member of that suite. It's all automated. Downside is that, once again, you kind of have to accept what's in the suite, right? You can't go shopping for best of breed and say, I want to use this instead. Also, because those interactions come pre-built, can't necessarily change or extend how they communicate with each other. And the person that made the decision or group of what suite to buy may not have had training, learning, and development in mind, right? They may have had different aspects. So it may not be something that's really tailored to your specific current needs and maybe future customer needs. Since you're kind of taking them all in a package, there may be apps in there that you're paying for that you may never use. And then finally, sometimes when a suite has been around for a while, they kind of add apps to it to kind of grow its reach. The applications added later may not have the same degree of integration that the original ones have. Beware of that as well. How does that sound, Jeremy?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Ken. So in your opinion, what do you see as the top risk when using an integrated suite like you just described?
Well, I just happen to have a slide for that. So one of our advisors, industry advisors, is Forrester, and they say it probably better than I could. So I will quote them. They said, learning platforms must play well with others, which is what we're talking about today. And the name of the game of HR technology today is actually integration. While core human capital management players may have learning solutions integrated into their offerings suite, they may not be the right ones for the spectrum of organizational needs, right? Does that answer your question?
It makes a lot of sense. So I've heard of one other thing called integration platforms. Can you tell me about that as well?
Absolutely. So some people actually offer platforms that will help you get integrations done. So the term for it is integrated platform as a service, or iPaaS. And they come with often a whole bunch of pre-built connectors to apps. So this is a good solution if you have a complex, dynamic, and growing environment of lots of apps that have to connect to each other. Good things about this approach is that it can be a very short time to value, especially if you've got those connectors to choose from. So you've gone through a process of integrating with the platform. It speaks your language now, and so now you're picking what it's integrated with, and it's a really quick turnaround. It's also easy to adapt and reuse those integrations. They often have tools where you can clone one and change what's different really quick and get up and running. In terms of the big organization-wide problem of monitoring those integrations that you've built, you often have a lot of great functionality that comes with an iPaaS, right? And you can kind of see how each one is doing and the integrity of your whole integration picture overall. Sometimes they also come with low or no code tools that allow people that really know what should be integrated, the subject matter experts, to directly create these integrations without having to know how to write code. And your cost savings actually grow with scale. So if you've got a bunch of integrations, each one is a unique project, which you then have to maintain, that's just kind of incremental cost is almost like double, triple as you go on. But as you add integrations in this paradigm, because you've integrated to the hub once and because you're leveraging pre-built things, your cost savings actually just continue to grow as you make use of this at scale. Downsides are that you kind of go with kind of what they've created, right? So if they've normalized the data model and they tell you, here's the interactions we've got for you, here's the pre-built connector, you've kind of got to leverage what they have, right? Kind of has to make sense in your world. Potential vendor lock-in could be a downside. So if you give your users these wonderful visual tools and they can build integrations, and then you say, we're going to switch vendors and take that away, that may be challenging for you. The other thing is just beware of the usage costs. So these vendors often have a billing model whereby they give you kind of a license fee that you have to pay every month or every year for a certain amount of functionality. And then they also often have a usage component to it, right? It may be the number of connectors you have bought and use, and sometimes even the amount of data transactions you consume, right? That one you really have to be careful of. So you have to be aware of what you're being billed for. You have to actually monitor it, right, to make sure there's no surprises. And maybe on the basis of that, make some corrections, some optimizations, right? Ideally, you would have a sandbox environment where you can actually try out these different connections and the data that's flowing between your applications and say, oh, this would cost us this. Is that acceptable before you actually get billed, right? How does that sound? Make sense?
Really, really good. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. It's great. So, so how would you? So, a lot of different options that you've just talked about. How would you go about sort of choosing that approach?
Yeah. So this is how you might go about choosing one for your needs. So you have to be well acquainted with your use case and understand what's going on, right? But what I'm going to just interject here first is start with your LMS, right? If you're integrating with an LMS that doesn't serve your needs, no amount of integration, complexity or sophistication is going to help you, right? So let's just spend a couple of minutes just talking about some key considerations. I could, we could spend a whole session on choosing an LMS, but let me just call it a few. So one, I guess, is a modern UI, right? So we call this a learner-centric UI. So for us, that means something that gets the learner from start to finish and retaining knowledge as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. Accessibility is another one. So we Absorb complies with WCAG 2.0 for accessibility standards to make sure that anyone can use the system. And modern UI should be learning conducive, right? So a bad user experience actually detracts from learning. It distracts, makes people upset. If there's a lot of heavy elements that provide a cognitive load on them, also distracts from learning. And as well, I guess, certainly younger users have grown up seeing very well designed, beautifully, executed applications. And so I think your UI for the LMS should at least be as good as your best of breed cloud apps nowadays. Or that itself would be a distraction because people would say, what is this thing that I have to use? It's so 1995.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you don't want the learners to have to learn the LMS. You want the learners to really learn the content.
Focus on the content, absolutely.
Yeah.
So learner engagement's another thing. And the way we say it is learn everywhere, right? And a lot of this hinges on kind of understanding the science of adult learning, which is a little bit different than the way children learn things. So some of the kind of more important aspects of that would be that adults tend to be more self-directed, right? They want their learning to be experiential. They want, to apply what they're learning right away. And we really want to tap into all kinds of intrinsic motivations of adults, right? So kind of remind them that they're trying to upskill, they're trying to gain a promotion or, expand their job and so on, right? And of course, one of the best ways to do that is to kind of provide learning in the flow of work. And that's another adult learning concept, which is the readiness to learn, right? So if you're really ready to learn, you're going to retain a lot more than if something is kind of like, hey, learn this now, right? And as Jeremy mentioned, we have the Infuse product, which is part of the Absorb offering, which basically allows you to inject that content in the flow of work. Lastly, the data model itself that's driving the LMS should be extensible. So if you've got some specific custom fields or workflows, you should be able to add those. You should be able to access the data model various ways, right? Either from admin consoles of some kind, from reports, and perhaps APIs and other integration methods offered. And then finally, underpinning a lot of what's going on inside our LMS is an event model. So certain things have happened, therefore different parts of the system need to react to that. And we even have some of our clients kind of accessing that event model so they can be made aware of when things change that they need to know.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so now that you've chosen your LMS, then what?
All right, so you've got an LMS to build on. What's your approach to choosing integration? Just an overall guideline. Once again, I'm quoting one of our advisors, Gartner. Avoid a one-size-all approach to integrating cloud-based apps, which you have a lot of them. Instead, choose the right approach for each integration use case, seeking to maximize the benefit delivered by that integration in the context of your overall portfolio and integrator personas, who's actually benefiting from the integration, and that you reuse existing tools when appropriate. So when appropriate, still call it to that. So just because you have a certain tech stack or certain expertise, you can't handcuff yourself to that, right? You have to be able to have the flexibility to pick the right tool. All right. So here are some capabilities that you could use. So take your use case, understand your use case of what you're trying to integrate and why, and then think about how important each one of these capabilities are to your use case. And if the technology you're considering and the vendor supplying it give enough of this to solve your problem, right? Okay, so the first one is the ability to adapt. So when things change, you want to swap out the apps, you want to swap out the data source, or even the environment it runs in. Can you do that without starting over? Make sense to you, Jeremy?
So I know when I'm considering an integration, yeah, exactly. When I try to sort of beware of what you mentioned on the slide previously is called vendor lock-in, right? So my organizational needs might grow, might change, and my first kick at anything might not be so good in the future. And so I want to make sure that we can adapt, we can avoid vendor lock-in. So and it can't be crippling in order to make a change like that. So I definitely agree with that. This is a key capability.
Another one is the ability to extend, right? So certainly once you have a few integrations under your belt now, you want to be able to very quickly turn around things you've done with minimal rework, right? Without starting over. Does it make sense to you as well, or?
Totally agree. And then one point to add there is that it shouldn't be more work to extend something than it was to build it from scratch, right? So look for an integration approach that you can satisfy today's needs and then also grow into some future needs.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the other one is monitoring. So again, when you have a complex environment of many integrations, you want to protect your investment. So just to make sure that things are integrations are doing what they're supposed to do, they're healthy. They're not taking a ridiculous amount of time to return answers, right? The service hasn't died or something like that. That's pretty important. Similarly, reuse. Once I've put a lot of investment of identifying business logic and capturing it, and I've mapped the data for the exchange, I want to be able to quickly kind of turn those around as well. Agree with that one?
I do. Aren't all integrations unique though? Can we expect reuse?
Unique, but yeah, there's a certain basis of things that once you have a few integrations done, again, you have those data maps. Maybe you kind of clone something and say, this data map is like 99% the same, except I've got these custom fields, right? So you should never have to, start from scratch typing in a new data map. I think security you touched on earlier, and it's maybe not something you want to add on later, especially if you have governance and other regulations around privacy, around having to tell your clients that their data is protected because we follow certain security protocols, right? So you want, if that's part of your workflow and that's part of what you do, you're going to want that capability kind of baked into what you choose, right? And
so I mentioned security and privacy earlier, Ken, when we were talking about challenges. I'll say it again, right? Data encryption in transit and at rest, as well as important granular access control is super important here. So users should only have access to the data that they really need in the moment to do their jobs. And something that we take training on a yearly basis is GDPR. And so when I think of that, I think security.
Yeah, and the last one on the slide is mediation. So if you've got an environment where there's all kinds of different apps trading information in different ways, right? So you've got, this one's talking API and this one's a messaging system, or they're putting out things. One of them has XML and the other one has JSON, as the payload that's being exchanged. So your platform should be able to kind of speak all those languages and ease kind of the translation between them.
Okay, you got a little technical there, saying things like XML, JSON, stuff like that. How does this help me?
How does this help you? So once again, if the platform is like an integration platform as a service, they will often have a normalized data model for you sitting in the middle, which you integrate to, and then those connectors will speak whatever they need to speak for you. So you don't have to worry about that format if it's a scary thing.
Got it.
You even have communities of practice or communities in certain areas that actually build and share those pre-built connectors with each other, which is kind of cool. So here's a problem I've already solved. Go leverage it. So here's a set of capabilities. Would you add any others?
As you were talking there, I did think of two other items that I would want to consider. The first being, I've experienced projects in the past with intermittent or unreliable connections between two systems, such as like when we've got people in the field or on mobile devices. So one of the things that I would say is let's also consider like request persistence, communication retry strategies. Let's make sure that there's sort of some fail-safe in here in case things don't go perfectly. And then you mentioned actually earlier around subject matter experts being able to assist in the creation of integrations. And in our organization, I see, variety of experts that have the knowledge to, who would have the knowledge of what integrations would be required and, the details of those, but don't have the technical skill to implement. And so you said something before, low code, no code tools. And I think if we could also provide, some sort of visual tools, then these experts can become, a greater part of the process, helping us get, more scale in terms of the number of integrations, and then, get them faster as well.
Yeah, some strong points. Thanks.
Awesome. So, Ken, let me jump a little bit. So now we've talked about, some of the different approaches. We talked about the challenges. Let's talk about a little bit around the capabilities that Absorb offers and kind of where we stand with integrations at Absorb. Our integration ecosystem is growing, and today we have integrations with content providers, payment gateways, deeper integrations or bi-directional integrations with ADP and Salesforce to share learning information and learning progress. We have communication integrations to help facilitate our ILC sessions, as well as a pretty robust set of APIs that can enable some pretty unique use cases. We also have a professional services team that can help create those custom tailored integrations on a per client basis that you talked about earlier in our discussion. So this is a snapshot of kind of where we are today. We recognize that there's still some room to grow. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's coming. And a forum like this, discussion like this, let's give a little bit of a glimpse of something that's in progress. So we recognize that there are some integration targets we just don't connect with easily, at least not yet. And I mentioned off the top, please, add to the chat, add to the Q&A, the target systems that you guys use in your organizations, so that it gives us more data when we make decisions on how broad to integrate. But please do that. But here's where we're starting. Okay, so my team, we're currently working on a method leveraging an iPaaS solution, like Ken just talked about, that will allow us to increase the number of systems that we integrate with. And we're going to start with a focus on HRIS and HCM systems. So, happy to say that we're targeting Q1 for our first set of integrations that will allow you to pull in users from Workday and UKG into the LMS. And then coming soon, we're going to be able to send progress back to those systems. Okay, we are intending to go wider than these two, but this is our starting point. Again, available, Q1 2023. So we're happy to be working on that, and there's definitely a focus at Absorb on increasing the number of integrations that we offer. All right, so just to wrap up before we get to some Q&A, we covered the following today, right? We covered that your LMS needs to integrate with other vital applications that you use. There's application ecosystem at play here, allowing for automated workflows, better visibility, and improved learning outcomes. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to integrate your LMS. And if you require many or complex integrations, integration platforms and tech partners, they can help you with that, right? We can help you with that, right? Absorb also has a growing set of integration options to help maximize the value of your training investment. So that's sort of, we're looking forward to, helping you guys, integrate your LMS with your other applications to give you the absolute best value. So Kim, why don't I pass to you, and we can see if there's any questions that are on the line.
Thanks. Great information, gentlemen. I learned a lot in your presentation. There's a lot of complexity when looking at integrations. So it's a great topic, and we've got some great questions coming in. First of all, is there a plan to integrate notifications with Slack? Use case learners do not have or use their email accounts. What's happening with Slack, gents?
Yeah, I can say that is under consideration for next year. Absolutely. So it's on our list. Generally speaking, right now we're in a planning phase for 2023, and we're looking at all the different feedback we've gotten from our internal staff. We have an ideas portal and market information in general, and that is definitely something that we've heard that people would like a few different types of workflow options in Slack itself relating to LMS and notifications as well.
Yeah, I'll add to that and say that my employees don't use email comment resonates with me because I've heard that before. And whether Slack is the answer, or there are other sort of avenues or venues that we can offer, as Ken said, yeah, definitely something we are considering.
That's good to know. Yeah, because I've also heard that as well, that people don't necessarily use their email address. So it's good to know that there's option. Another question about our integrations, is the PayPal integration more robust than just using PayPal as a payment processor? How robust is the PayPal integration we currently have?
I can maybe jump in here. I think today's PayPal integration is really more like you suggested, like a payment processor. But we are taking a look at sort of our e-commerce, offering holistically and seeing how we can make that better. And so, if you have some additional ideas that would make your PayPal integration, more useful, please, bring them up and sort of let us know the details. Right, one venue that you can get your voice heard, as Ken mentioned just a second ago, is our ideas portal. That it's regularly monitored. We do triage all of the requests that come in, and so please, detail out your use case there, and let's have a conversation.
And just to add what Jeremy said, sorry, one thing that interests us with PayPal is it has some degree of support for multi-currency. And so we're kind of looking at that as something we can leverage in the future.
It's great. Thank you both. We have a question regarding HRIS data. Sometimes we find that our HR Ceridian data isn't always the actual source of truth. Hard to imagine, I know. I think that is because it's easier to update some of the other IT systems, such as Office or Exchange, and or that some of the updates aren't synced backwards to the HR system. Is it possible to get user data from our IT systems? And if so, what are the pitfalls?
I think in order to answer that question, I would probably start by asking some questions, right? What systems are the source of truth? How is that sort of governed? Then we would look to see, is there a method that we could use that golden source as a way to import into the LMS? And so at that point, if it's sort of a standard system, there might be an integration for it, or it could be you could be looking at a custom solution at that point.
Yeah, some clients have told me that our LMS is when the common denominator or the common kind of thread through a lot of the different applications. So they say, we're just going to use your system as a source of truth, right? In certain use cases, and we'll make sure that everybody sends updates to you, and then we pull those out, right? So that's another solution as well.
Great. Another question about integration, surprising in an integrations seminar. Will you begin to integrate with intranet platforms? For example, Simpler, Xero, Igloo. I can see that being a need with a lot of information being stored on an intranet platform. Interesting.
I would have to say not at this time, but we'll take that one away.
Yeah, it's always good to hear what other people are looking to integrate with, right? It's great that we have this kind of feedback from clients. So thank you very much for that. Can you provide more information regarding ILC session communication integration and what exactly that means or looks like?
Ken, do you want to handle this one, or would you like me to?
I could.
Okay.
So what are the flows that integration would allow with ILC providers like Microsoft Teams is the question? Yeah. So Teams and a few other ones at least in terms of the video functionality like it, including Zoom and WebEx. What our integrations do now is they allow the instructor to set up just a group of virtual meetings, right? And then just to use that platform to send out the link to other people, to join that meeting. We're also looking at information about the session that those packages already collect, right? So, for example, they know who's there, right? Some of the compliance is attendance based, so it's very important to track exactly who's there, kind of confirm that. And so, coming in November, Jeremy's team is working on. I'll let you say
yes,
what you're
actually
working on with regard to attendance. Take it away.
Sure. We're working on a couple of things with regards to attendance, and November might not actually be the date. I believe it's going to be a little bit later. But one of the things that we're looking at specifically with Zoom and Microsoft Teams is allowing the instructor post-session to be able to autofill their attendance tracking. And so what we've heard with some clients, they've got very large ILC sessions north of we're talking hundreds to low thousands of attendees, and the instructor effort to mark people as having attended or not attended is a large burden, and so we want to lift that. And so leveraging some technology on the back end, we're going to allow instructors to sort of fetch what Zoom and Teams think were the attendee lists, and then we'll reconcile that. And so what we anticipate is it's really going to reduce that burden for the instructor to mark attendances. And so that work is nearing completion and is likely going to be not in our November release, but our following release.
That's great. We have some people cheering to hear that news. So that's
wonderful.
Good.
All right.
Many HR solution providers have no incentive to make integrations or even simple file swaps easier since they compete in the LMS space. What is Absorb doing to standardize some of these integrations so every customer doesn't have to go out and do it on their own?
Want to take this one? Or do you want me to take this one?
Why don't you take this one, and then we can, if I have anything to add, I will.
I think integrations recently, last few years, have taken off to the point where you want to be seen, if nothing else for marketing, to be integrating with everybody else. So a lot of the providers, or even some of the CRM applications like Salesforce, for example, they have marketplaces, right? And so you want to be someone that says, I've got an app on Salesforce's marketplace that integrates with them, right? And so even if there is some segments that you compete with some other organizations, it still is, there's more compelling reasons to provide those integrations, right? And so a lot of the iPaaS providers have just a lot of off-the-shelf integrations, and some of them are between direct competitors. So, so I think just the needs of the industry and competitive moves, countering competitive moves, are motivating a lot of companies to just provide those integrations. It's not something that Absorb has to kind of break down a wall, fortunately.
Yeah.
We do also do some partner marketing where we reach out and say, were you going to say something about AEP partnership?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So arguably there are some HR applications which also have an LMS, which is right for some situations and ours is right for others. And so ADP is an example of a company that we partner with, and we co-market, send people each way, and we also tightly integrate our two apps together, right, to exchange that data, because it makes sense for both of us. You want to add to that? Being the one that manages that?
Yeah, I was going to say, sort of in industry, table stakes also include, making APIs available, and so when those APIs are available, that sort of is an opportunity for a custom integration, or for iPaaS providers to actually create these off-the-shelf connectors that Ken was mentioning. And so I believe in many cases, we'll be able to support these even when the source system or the other system might not be as motivated to assist with a connector. The tools are generally out there.
Well, thank you both for all of this information. This hour has gone by so quickly, and you've covered a lot of stuff, and we weren't able to get to all the questions, but the folks that we're able to follow up with, we will do so after the webinar. Before we go, I'd like to remind you of our last webinar. Jeremy, if you just flip to the last slide, it's our final session of the Summit series. It's this Thursday, November 17th, about designing courses to foster learning program growth. We're really excited about the topic, and we're really excited that you attended today. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. As we mentioned, this recording will be available on the Summit portal next week. Thanks again, Jeremy and Kenneth. We appreciated your time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.